The cursed touch. The cold wind howled across the dark prison chamber. Metal walls, covered in frost, surrounded Zaira like a cage of ice. She sat alone in the corner, her glowing blue hands clenched into fists. She had stopped counting the days. She had stopped hoping. She was a prisoner, not because of a crime, but because of what she was. Her touch was death. She had learned it the hard way. As a child, she once reached for her mother's hand, only to watch in horror as ice spread over her skin. Within seconds, her mother had become a frozen statue, lifeless and cold. Zaira screamed, but no one came to help. No one dared to touch her. She had tried to control it. She wore thick gloves, wrapped herself in layers, avoided contact at all costs. But accidents happened. People panicked, and every time she touched someone, they turned to ice. Word spread across the galaxy. The girl with the deadly hands, the walking curse, the frozen death. And now she was a prisoner of General Kravox, the cruel warlord who ruled over this sector of space. He had captured her, not to execute her, but to use her. "You will serve me," he had told her. "You will freeze my enemies, or you will rot in this cell." Zaira refused. She would rather be alone than become a weapon. And so she waited in the dark, trapped in the freezing cold of her own existence. But tonight, something was different. The heavy steel door creaked open, and a group of armored guards entered. Zaira barely looked up. They came every few days to offer her food and demand her loyalty. She never answered. But this time, they weren't alone. A man was thrown into the cell. He hit the ground hard, coughing, before pushing himself up. Zaira's eyes widened. They had never put anyone else in here with her. The man groaned and wiped blood from his face. He had short brown hair, a rough face, and a soldier's posture. He looked tough, but human. Zaira's heart pounded. No, they wouldn't. The lead guard smirked. "He's your new cellmate, Zaira. Play nice." Then they left, locking the door behind them. Silence filled the room. The human sat up, rubbing his jaw. "Well," he muttered, "this is just great." Zaira stayed frozen, staring at him. "They threw him in here with me. Did they not know? Or worse, did they want him to die?" The man finally looked at her, blinking in the dim light. "You don't look happy to see me." Zaira swallowed. "You need to stay away." The human raised an eyebrow. "That bad, huh?" She curled her hands into fists, pressing them against her legs. "You don't understand. If I touch you, you'll die." He didn't move. He just studied her, his face unreadable. "That's so." Zaira's chest tightened. Why wasn't he scared? Why wasn't he backing away? "Listen to me," she insisted, her voice shaking. "Everyone I touch turns to ice. Everyone." She waited for the usual reaction: fear, panic, begging. Instead, the man simply sighed. "Figures. I finally get caught, and they throw me in with a death sentence." Zaira clenched her teeth. He thought she was lying. She stood up suddenly. He tensed but didn't move away. "I'm serious," she said. "I don't want to kill you, but if you come any closer." He smirked. "Relax, princess. I'm not looking for a hug." She frowned. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like she was normal. But then, it happened. He shifted his weight, trying to stand, but stumbled. His arm brushed against her hand. Zaira gasped. "No." She pulled back instantly, expecting to see ice spread over his skin, expecting him to scream. But nothing happened. The human blinked, looking at her hand, then at his own arm. "Huh. That's weird." Zaira stared in shock. Impossible. For years her touch had been deadly. Everyone she ever touched had frozen in seconds. But this human, he was fine. Zaira's breath came in quick gasps. She reached out hesitantly, touching his arm again. Still, nothing. Her mind spun. How? Why? What made him different? The human noticed her stunned expression and grinned. Guess I'm tougher than I look. Zira didn't laugh. She barely breathed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't a curse to someone. A small spark of hope flickered in her chest. But that hope came with a terrifying question. Why was this human immune to her? And more importantly, what did it mean for her future? The impossible encounter. Zira's fingers trembled as she stared at the human. Her whole life, she had feared her own skin. She had avoided even the smallest touch, knowing that one mistake could mean death. And yet, this man had just brushed against her, and he was still alive. Her mind raced. It wasn't a fluke. She touched him again, this time deliberately. The back of her fingers pressed against his arm. No ice, no frost, no death. The human smirked. Not what I expected from my first day in prison. Zira pulled her hand back, staring at him like he was some kind of anomaly. This isn't possible. Yeah. The man stretched, rolling his shoulder. You don't look so dangerous to me. She snapped out of her daze. You don't understand. Every living thing I've ever touched, every single one, froze to death in seconds. You should be dead. The human raised an eyebrow. Well, I feel pretty alive. He patted his chest as if proving a point. Zira's chest tightened. Why was he different? Who are you? She asked. The man leaned back against the cold metal wall, rubbing his wrists where the guards had bound him earlier. Captain Ryan Carter, he said casually. Terran Union. Rebel, apparently. Zira frowned. Human. Ryan gave her a sideways glance. And you're? She hesitated. It had been a long time since she had introduced herself to anyone. Zira. Well, Zira, nice to meet you. I'd shake your hand, but... He gave a playful shrug. She didn't laugh. Instead, she whispered, Why aren't you frozen? Ryan's expression turned serious. He looked down at his arm, where her fingers had touched him. No clue, he admitted, but it looks like your magic hands don't work on me. Magic. That's what some species had called it. A curse. A nightmare. A weapon. But never had it been harmless. Zira sat back down, her mind spinning. If this human was immune to her, did that mean all humans were? Was there something about their biology? Their DNA? Or was it just him? Before she could ask, Ryan spoke again. So tell me something. Are they keeping you here because of that? He gestured toward her hands. Or are you just bad at making friends? Zira's jaw clenched. I'm a prisoner, just like you. Ryan studied her. Doesn't feel like we're the same kind of prisoner. Zira looked away. He wasn't wrong. The warlord, General Kravox, didn't want her dead. He wanted to use her. But Ryan, the guards had thrown him in here without a second thought. They expected him to die. They didn't know he was immune to her. Zira's breath quickened. If Kravox found out that a human could resist her power, he would want to study Ryan. Experiment on him. Maybe even weaponize him too. Ryan sighed. Well, whatever their reason, I'm not planning on staying. She turned sharply. What? He gave her a lopsided grin. I don't do well in cages, and something tells me you don't either. Zira frowned. Escaping isn't that easy. Ryan chuckled. Oh, sweetheart, it's never easy. But trust me, I've broken out of worse. She stared at him. He spoke so casually, as if prison breaks were just part of his normal life. Was this the human spirit she had heard rumors about? The will to fight, no matter the odds? Zira shook her head. Even if you get out of this cell, there are guards everywhere. Security droids. Patrol ships. Ryan smirked. Yeah, but you have something they're afraid of. She blinked. You mean? Your power, Ryan said. They don't lock up regular prisoners in frozen bunkers. They fear you, which means they think you're unstoppable. Zira let his words sink in. For so long, she had hated her power. She had seen it as a burden, a curse. But maybe, just maybe, it could be her way out. Ryan leaned forward. So, what do you say? Wanna prove them right? Zaira's heart pounded. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. To be continued. Escape from the warlord. The cold metal walls of the cell seemed to shrink around Zaira as she considered Ryan's words. Escape. She had thought about it before, 1,000 times, but she had always dismissed the idea. There was no way out. No one could help her. No one could touch her. Until now. Ryan Carter, the human who should be dead, was sitting across from her, grinning like escape was just a casual weekend activity. His confidence made her uneasy. You really think we can get out of here? She asked. Ryan leaned back against the wall, stretching his arms. I don't think. I know. But we're gonna need a plan. Zaira hesitated. If they failed, Kravox would punish them, or worse. But if they succeeded, she clenched her fists. No more cages. I'm listening, she said. Ryan's grin widened. Good choice. The plan. Ryan stood and paced the small cell. All right, here's what we know. 1. This place is freezing, which means they probably store energy for heating somewhere nearby. 2. The guards think I'm already dead. He smirked. That gives us an advantage. Zaira frowned. That doesn't help us break out. Not yet, Ryan agreed. But you're their worst nightmare. She tensed. What do you mean? He crossed his arms. The guards are terrified of you. That means they'll hesitate. That hesitation is our chance. Zaira thought about it. He was right. No one ever got close to her unless they had no choice. If she acted like she was ready to fight, the guards might back off, just long enough. Ryan crouched near the heavy cell door, inspecting it. Now, we just need a distraction. Zaira watched as he carefully ran his fingers over the small panel next to the door. His movements were precise, practiced. You're a soldier, she said suddenly. Ryan glanced at her. Was it the charm that gave it away? No, she said. It's the way you act. You've done this before. Ryan didn't deny it. Let's just say this isn't my first time behind enemy lines. Zaira narrowed her eyes. There was more to him than he was letting on. But before she could press him, a loud metallic clang echoed through the corridor. Footsteps. Showtime, Ryan muttered. The first move. The door slid open, and 2 guards stepped inside, their weapons raised. Get up, one of them ordered. Zaira stood slowly. The guards flinched. Ryan stayed sitting on the ground, acting weak. Hey, mind giving me a minute? I just got thrown in here, and my head's still ringing. One of the guards kicked him hard in the ribs. Ryan groaned, but didn't react otherwise. Zaira's heart pounded. They didn't know. They didn't know he was immune to her. Move, the other guard snapped, motioning Zaira forward. She took a step, then lunged toward the first guard. He stumbled back in terror, raising his hands defensively. Wait. That moment of hesitation was all Ryan needed. He shot up from the ground, slamming his elbow into the second guard's helmet. The impact sent the soldier staggering backward. Before the first guard could react, Zaira grabbed his arm, pretending to freeze him. The guard screamed, dropping his weapon as pure fear overtook him. Ryan snatched the fallen weapon and spun, aiming at the second guard. Night-night. Zap. A stun blast sent the second guard collapsing to the floor. The first guard was still panicking, his mind too clouded with terror to realize he wasn't actually frozen. Zaira grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Run." The soldier didn't hesitate. He bolted from the cell, too scared to sound the alarm. Ryan whistled. That was smooth. Zaira exhaled, her heart racing. Let's move. Into the fire. The 2 ran down the corridor, keeping low. Ryan led the way, moving like he had memorized the layout. Where are we going? Zaira whispered. Hangar, Ryan answered. We steal a ship, and we're gone. Zira followed, ignoring the pounding in her chest. Freedom. For the first time, it felt possible. But as they turned a corner, a squad of guards blocked their path. Blasters raised. Freeze, one of them shouted. Ryan glanced at Zira. Think they mean that literally. Zira clenched her fists. Time to find out. The human connection. Zira's pulse pounded in her ears. She and Ryan stood frozen in the corridor, facing a squad of armed guards. Their weapons were aimed, fingers tight on the triggers. Ryan let out a slow breath. Well, that's not ideal. Shut up. One of the guards snapped. Hands up. Now. Zira glanced at Ryan, who gave her a barely noticeable nod. He was calm, too calm, like he had already figured something out. She raised her hands, but only slightly. You really want me to move my hands? She asked, her voice low, almost threatening. The guards hesitated. They were afraid of her. Ryan caught on immediately. He smirked. Yeah, you sure about that, boys? You know what happens when she touches someone, right? The guards exchanged nervous glances. They knew. They had seen what Zira could do, and none of them wanted to be the next victim. Don't listen to them, their squad leader barked, but there was doubt in his voice. Zira took a slow step forward. You want to take that risk? She asked. The guard stiffened. Ran, ever the opportunist, acted first. With lightning speed, he grabbed a loose pipe from the floor and threw it at the nearest guard's face. The impact wasn't enough to knock him out, but it was enough to cause panic. Run, Ryan yelled. Zira didn't need to be told twice. She charged forward, hands outstretched. She didn't even need to touch anyone. Just the threat of it was enough. The guards flinched and stumbled backward, too afraid to fire. Ryan tackled one of them, grabbing his blaster. Zap! A stun shot sent the squad leader crashing to the floor. Zira grabbed another guard's wrist. He screamed, yanking his arm away as if it were already freezing. But it wasn't. She let him believe the worst. The squad broke. They turned and ran. Ryan dusted himself off. Well, that was easy. Zira exhaled. They were afraid. Of course they were, Ryan said. You're the deadliest thing they've ever seen. Zira hesitated. I don't want to be. Ryan studied her. His cocky expression softened, and for the first time, he really looked at her. You're not a weapon, Zira, he said. You're a survivor. There's a difference. Zira swallowed. No one had ever said that to her before. But there was no time for emotions now. We need to move, she said. Ryan grinned. Now you're thinking like a human. The chase begins. The hangar was close. Just a few more corridors. But as they ran, alarms blared through the facility. The warlord knew they had escaped. Ryan sprinted ahead, checking corners. They'll block off the hangar soon, he said. We need a ship before. A blast door slammed shut in front of them. Ryan skidded to a stop. Oh, come on. Zira turned. More guards. This time, armored. No hesitation. No fear. Weapons raised. A voice echoed over the speakers. Deep. Cruel. Familiar. Did you really think you could escape me, Zira? General Kravox. She clenched her fists. The warlord laughed. You have nowhere to run. And you. His voice turned amused. You brought a human into this. Do you think he can save you? Zira gritted her teeth. Ryan sighed. Man, these villains always love to talk. Zira stepped forward. I don't need saving. Kravox chuckled. Oh, then why run? Her jaw clenched. Because I finally can. Ryan nudged her. Nice comeback. Kravox's amusement vanished. Kill the human. Capture Zira. The guards opened fire. Ryan dove left. Zira rolled right. The shots barely missed them, scorching the metal walls. Ryan returned fire, dropping 2 guards in seconds. We need a way out. Fast. Zira's heart pounded. Then she spotted it. A ventilation shaft. She grabbed Ryan's arm. There. He followed her gaze and grinned. Smart girl. They sprinted for it. But more guards were coming. Too many. Zara turned. This was her chance. She raised her hands, focused. For the first time in her life, she controlled her power. Ice spread across the floor in a thin, slick layer. The guards charged and slipped. Ryan hooted. Nice move. He jumped into the vent, then pulled Zara in behind him. They crawled fast, leaving the chaos behind. A moment to breathe. The vent led them to another corridor, quiet and empty. For now. Ryan sat against the wall, catching his breath. Well, that was fun. Zara wiped sweat from her forehead. That was reckless. Ryan grinned. Yeah, but we're alive. She couldn't argue with that. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Zara found herself staring at her hands. She had controlled it. She had used her power without killing anyone. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe she wasn't just a weapon. Ryan nudged her. Hey. She looked up. He smirked. We're not done yet. Ready to steal a ship. Zara felt something strange. Something new. A spark of excitement. She smiled. Let's go. The warlord's trap. The air inside the ventilation shaft was thin, and Zara could hear nothing but the sound of her own breathing and the faint rustling of Ryan moving ahead of her. The metal walls were cold against her palms, but she didn't care. They had escaped the prison cell. They had dodged the guards. Now, all they needed was a ship. Ryan whispered over his shoulder. The hangar should be just below us. Zara nodded. They had come too far to fail now. Ryan reached a small vent cover and peered through. A grin spread across his face. Bingo. He gestured for Zara to move beside him, and she did. Below them, the hangar bay stretched out, rows of ships, from small fighters to larger cargo vessels. More importantly, it wasn't empty. Kravox's soldiers patrolled the area, heavily armed. Zara's stomach twisted. We'll never make it past them. Ryan smirked. That's quitter talk. She frowned. It's logic. Ryan scanned the hangar, then pointed. See that ship? The small one with the blue markings. Zara followed his gaze. A Sparrow-class stealth cruiser sat near the back. Compact. Fast. Untraceable, once in hyperspace. The perfect escape ship, Ryan whispered. Zara nodded. How do we get to it? Ryan's grin widened. Leave that to me. Zara had learned enough about humans in the past hour to know that when Ryan said something like that, chaos was about to follow. The diversion. Ryan pulled a small detonator device from his belt. Zara gave him a questioning look. Got this off one of the guards, he whispered. Zara sighed. Why am I not surprised? Ryan winked and aimed the device at a fuel canister on the far side of the hangar. With a click, he activated the detonator. Boom! The explosion rocked the entire bay. A shockwave of heat and smoke erupted, sending guards flying. Alarms blared. Move, Ryan said, yanking the vent cover off. They jumped down, landing on a high platform overlooking the hangar. The guards, now in full panic mode, scrambled toward the fire. Ryan turned to Zara. See, distractions. They work. Zara shook her head. Reckless. Ryan grinned. Effective. They sprinted down the catwalk, moving fast toward the ship. Zara kept her hands ready, knowing that if anyone got in their way, she'd have to use her power again. They reached the Sparrow-class cruiser. Ryan hit the control panel, and the entrance ramp lowered with a hiss. We're almost out of here, he said. But the second Zara stepped forward, a deep, cold voice echoed through the hangar. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? General Kravox. The warlord arrives. The towering alien warlord emerged from the smoke, his dark armor glinting under the hangar lights. His red eyes burned with fury. Around him, dozens of soldiers regrouped, weapons raised. Zara's stomach dropped. It was a trap. Ryan swore under his breath. Should have known. Kravox smirked. You're impressive, Captain Carter. But your luck has run out. His gaze shifted to Zura. And you think you're free. He shook his head. You belong to me. Zura glared at him. I belong to no one. Kravox chuckled, still pretending to be strong. He motioned to his guards. Seize them. The soldiers charged forward. Ryan grabbed Zura's arm. We have to move. Now. But she wasn't listening. Something inside her snapped. She had spent her whole life running, hiding, being treated like a monster. Not anymore. She turned toward the oncoming soldiers and raised her hands. The ice awakens. A cold wave of energy pulsed from Zura's fingertips. The air around her crackled. The first group of guards froze mid-step, their bodies instantly covered in a thick layer of ice. Their weapons turned brittle and shattered. Ryan stared in awe. Well, damn. Zura had never done this before. Not on purpose. But something was different now. She could control it. The remaining soldiers hesitated. Fear flickered in their eyes. Kravox scowled. You dare use your curse against me. Zura stepped forward. The air around her grew colder. The metal beneath her feet froze solid. Kravox clenched his fists. You think you can stop me? Zura's gaze locked onto his. No, she said. I know I can. The ice awakens. The air in the hangar crackled with frost as Zura stepped forward, her hands glowing with a strange, pulsing cold. The floor beneath her feet froze solid, and a sharp chill spread through the air. The soldiers who had charged her stopped mid-step, their boots skidding as ice climbed up their armor. Panic spread through their ranks. Ryan, still gripping his stolen blaster, whistled under his breath. Well, that's new. Zura's breath came in steady, controlled puffs. For the first time in her life, she wasn't losing control, she was using it. Kravox snarled, his red eyes burning. You think this makes you strong? He flexed his massive arms, stepping forward despite the freezing cold creeping across the floor. You are nothing but a failed experiment, a cursed weapon with no master. Zura's fingers curled into fists. You're wrong. Kravox bared his teeth. Then prove it. He lunged at her. The final battle. Ryan fired first, but Kravox moved fast, too fast for his size. The blaster shot skimmed past his armor, barely slowing him down. Zura didn't run. She raised her hands, channeling the cold outward. A wave of frost erupted from her palms, rushing toward Kravox. The warlord twisted to avoid the brunt of it, but his left arm was instantly encased in ice. He roared, shattering the ice with sheer strength. Ryan dodged left, trying to get another clear shot. I hate to break it to you, Princess, but he looks pretty pissed. Zura's mind raced. She couldn't freeze Kravox completely. He was too strong, too fast. But she didn't need to. She just needed to slow him down. Kravox swung at her, his massive fist aimed at her head. She dodged, barely missing the strike, and slammed her icy palm against his chest. Frost spread across his armor, slowing his movements. Kravox grunted, shaking it off. You think ice can stop me? Zura smirked. No, but it'll make this hurt more. Ryan suddenly appeared at Kravox's side, blaster in one hand, stolen shock baton in the other. Crack! The baton slammed into Kravox's exposed neck. A burst of electricity surged through him, amplified by the ice on his body. Kravox staggered. His muscles seized. His eyes widened in shock. Ryan smirked. Guess you're not as tough as you think. Zura took her chance. She grabbed his arm with both hands, focusing everything she had. Cold surged through her veins. Ice raced up Kravox's arm, his chest, his neck. His skin turned pale blue, his breaths coming in ragged, shuddering gasps. For the first time, Kravox looked afraid. You can't, he gasped. You won't kill me. Zura's grip tightened. Memories flashed through her mind. The fear, The isolation, the years of being treated like a monster. She would not be controlled again. "You're right," she whispered. With a sharp flick of her hands, she froze Kravox's legs to the floor, trapping him in place. Kravox roared in fury, but he couldn't move. Ryan grinned. "I'd say that's checkmate." Zira turned toward the remaining guards. They didn't wait to see what would happen next. They dropped their weapons and ran. The escape. Ryan grabbed Zira's wrist. "Come on. We still need that ship." Zira exhaled, shaking off the last remnants of ice from her fingers. She had won. But it wasn't over yet. They ran toward the stealth cruiser, its entrance ramp still down. Ryan jumped inside first, heading straight for the controls. Zira followed, her heart pounding. Ryan's fingers flew over the dashboard. "All right, let's see if I remember how to fly one of these." Zira sat in the co-pilot's seat. "You don't know how to fly it." Ryan gave her a cocky grin. "Relax, I've stolen worse." Outside, alarms blared. More soldiers were rushing into the hangar. "Any time now," Zira urged. Ryan slammed the ignition switch. The engines roared to life. Zira glanced out the window. Kravox was still trapped in ice, watching them go with pure hatred in his eyes. Ryan activated the thrusters, and the ship lifted off the ground. The hangar doors started to close. Ryan gritted his teeth. "Hold on." The ship shot forward, slipping through the narrowing gap just in time. As they cleared the atmosphere, Zira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They were free. Finally. Ryan let out a triumphant laugh. "Now that's what I call a prison break." Zira allowed herself a small smile. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Kravox wasn't dead. He would come after them. And she still didn't know why humans were immune to her power. Ryan leaned back in his seat. "So, where to now?" Zira gazed out into the endless stretch of stars. "I don't know," she admitted. Ryan smirked. "Then let's find out."